Sarah, I see the text you sent me. Just now, sent it earlier about the presentation.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. It is 7 o'clock, so we're gonna go ahead and start. Can the people in the back row hear me okay? Okay, good, thanks. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight. If you have a cell phone with you, please put your cell phone in vibrate or some type of silent mode, so it won't be a distraction for anybody. This is a public meeting, a public hearing on our status on the sewer study that we're conducting. And we always start any of our meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance, so if you'll please all rise and join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Just to clarify, there is no sign-up sheet. We will be giving a presentation, and by we, I'm talking about our engineer, Greg Gustafson. Greg just called about 10 minutes ago. He had car trouble. He's back on the road. He should be here between 7:30 and 7:45. So until then, I'm gonna go ahead and give my side of the presentation, and we'll start talking about questions. And any of the technical questions on sewers, we'll wait till Greg gets here. So, go ahead and get started. About 2 years ago, the Illinois EPA announced 2 different kinds of grants for communities that didn't have sewers like Hudson. One was a grant of up to $20,000 to help pay for a study. And the second grant is an actual construction grant of $5 million, up to $5 million to help pay for a actual system to be built. So sewers have been talked about in Hudson for about as long as I've lived here, in 30, 40 years. But as far as I know, no one has ever done a serious study on it. It's been talked about, but that's been as far as things have gone. So with the opportunity to use the grant money, the board decided it was a good time to do a study. We looked at 4 different engineering firms that could do the study, and we decided on a company out of Urbana called Burns, Clancy and Associates. Greg Gustafson is the engineer who's doing our work, and he should be here shortly. They are doing the preliminary part of the study that we'll talk about tonight, let everybody know where we're at. But before we get into the study, go ahead, next slide. These are some of the things we're gonna look at tonight. We're gonna look at the revenues for Hudson, and kind of summarize it and see where our money comes from. We're gonna talk about the sewer, some of the advantages and disadvantages of a sewer system. I'm gonna explain what Bloomington Normal Water Reclamation District is, or BNWRD is the acronym. We're gonna talk about the options that were studied as far as our study goes and what the cost breakdown is. Talk about the option that we're recommending we pursue. I'll talk on some of the costs involved with it, the one-time costs and monthly costs. Talk about grants and loans that are available. And again, we'll get into some of the costs that we project that you'll have. Go ahead, next slide. I wanted to just review briefly where our current revenue comes from. This is for the village of Hudson. The big dark blue area is state income tax receipts that we get every year from the state. That is 34% of our revenue. The next biggest chunk of our revenue is sales tax revenue, which is 25% of our revenue. Property tax is 20% of our revenue. Utility tax is about 10%. Everything else adds up to about 11 additional percent. So the main things out of this chart is just to kind of show you that sales tax sales tax has been a growing revenue for the village. It's 25 up to 25% of our revenue now, and it has been very instrumental in allowing the village to provide good services to the residents. Next slide. The next slide is a chart of how our sales tax revenue has changed from the year 2002 to last year, 2022. In 2002, our revenue was about $85,000, and we are growing to $180,000 of revenue last year for 2022. And what I really want you to notice on this chart is that at the end of the chart, the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, how the sales tax revenue has done a major increase. And the two new businesses in town that are causing that major increase are Dollar General and the Sewing Studio. And they have both been great additions to the village and provided excellent revenue for the village to provide services with. Next slide. This is the breakdown on where your property tax goes. You may pay several $1,000s in property tax, but the village of Hudson gets 4% of what you pay. The Unit 5 gets 64% of it. The breakdown is on this slide. So if you pay $1,000 in sales tax, the village gets $40. I'm sorry, if you pay $1,000 in real estate tax, the village gets $40 of that. So we do get a considerable amount when you accumulate it all, but the majority of the real estate taxes that we all pay goes to Unit 5. I think we've all heard that and seen that before. Next slide. Okay, talk a little bit about the advantages and disadvantages of implementing a sewer system in Hudson or any other community as far as that goes. These were a list that the trustees and myself and our engineer put together on both sides. So first bullet point there, septic systems generally eventually fail. Cost of a new system today, it's been estimated between $15,000 and $30,000. Some of our lots in town may not have room for a new system. You cannot put a new septic system on top of the old one. The Plain County Health Department does not allow that. So if you have to put a new septic system in, it's got to be on ground that's new ground. It can't be on top of your old septic system. Federal EPA estimates the average life of a septic system is around 50 years. The Plain County Health Department says they estimate around 30 years. So I think the ground we have in Hudson must be really good for septics, because I know a lot of our systems are over 50 years old. And as far as we know, most of them are still working pretty well. but eventually generally they all fail. The drainage ditch that we have in Hudson flows into 6 Mile Creek, which runs into Lake Evergreen. And I think we all know that's one of our 2 sources. So we want to make sure that what we put in the ditch in Hudson is rainwater, that type of water, and nothing out of our home should go in there. Third bullet point, sewer system should make Hudson more attractive to businesses and homeowners considering locating in Hudson. As costs increase, growth is essential for the village to maintain services for our residents. Growth can also lead to decreased costs per household or whatever. It was pointed out in our last session that it may make it more attractive, but it does add costs to your home to implement it. So it's not a total win-win situation. There are obviously downsides to it too. So, fourth bullet point, implementing now will avoid a possible future EPA requirement to implement immediately and face potential EPA fines. Several communities in McLean County, I'll refer to Downs and Lexington, have both been forced by the EPA to implement sewer systems. There was pollution coming out of the towns going into Mackinac, and I'm not sure what creek it flowed to in Downs, but EPA forced those towns to put in a sewer system. Could happen here. I'm not aware of any major problems that we have that would force it. They are not forcing us now. I am not aware that they have ever written to the village of Hudson and said, hey, if you don't clean this up, you're going to have to put in a sewer system. So I want to make it clear that we're not being forced to do this. It could happen in the future, but we're not under the gun now to do it. Next bullet point, I'll bring up Benward, talk about it more later, but connecting to Benward eliminates the need for Hudson to have a licensed sewer plant operator and eliminates the need for a Hudson treatment facility. Benward is one of the options we looked at, and it turned out to be our preferred option. And when we talked to the EPA, they have told us that financing assistance is likely more available in the next 3 to 5 years than after 5 years. The big Inflation Reduction Act that got passed a couple years ago created billions of dollars that's available for different government programs. A lot of that money went to EPA, and the EPA is handing it down to the states, and that's how the Illinois came up with the $5 million program that they've got. Just we were told there's more money available for it now than what there ever has been in the past, and there's probably more money available now than what can come in the future. So we don't know for sure on that. So next slide. Some of the disadvantages are pretty obvious. There will be new monthly expenses, no way around it. Construction bonds that we get or loans that we get have to be paid off monthly. Treatment expenses have to be paid, so there will be new monthly bills. Generally speaking, our existing septic systems will not back up into the houses unless there's a strength failure with your septic system. The septic system could fail and not cause any kind of backup into your house. We've all heard about the nightmares in Bloomington and Normal with some of the flooding that's occurred and some of the backups that they've had in Bloomington Normal. A lot of those are in older neighborhoods where the drain for the rainwater and the drains for the sewer are the same pipes. 40, 50 years ago, there was one system that got put in for both sewage and stormwater, and They realize now that was a mistake. They've had a lot of issues with it. They're working to correct them. They got a lot of miles that they have to redo to get everything corrected from Bloomington normal. So, next bullet point, yes, roads and yards will be tore up during construction if we do this. We will not know for sure what financing assistance we can get until after the decision is made to proceed with building the system. The Hudson medium household income is above the state average. The medium household income has an impact on what kind of loans we can get or what kind of grants we can get for financing our system. The medium household income is available. You can go out and Google it. It's $82,500 for Hudson. I think the McLean County average was 73 or 74,000. So that does have an impact on what kind of grants and financing we can get for the project. The last bullet point, if we connect to Benward, it's probably going to require an additional lift station. Ground elevations are one of the factors that determine lift station requirements for any of the systems that we looked at. Lift stations can cost $500,000 to $1 million a piece just to build. So each one adds quite a bit to the total expense of the project. Next slide. Okay, Benward, Bloomington Normal Water Reclamation District. I think a lot of you have probably seen it from Interstate 5574 as you're going around the south west side of Bloomington. Benward is the system that the state required Bloomington and Normal to implement about, 70 or 80 years ago to treat wastewater. Bloomington and Normal both were contributing a considerable amount of pollution. Some of the creeks that feed into bigger creeks, like not 6 Mile Creek, but Sugar Creek that runs through Normal. So this is not a presentation. Some of this we just learned this week. We did a tour of Benward just to talk to them. 80 years ago, pollution, especially water pollution, wasn't that big a deal. It wasn't even looked at. I guess some of the butcher shops were throwing their scraps out in Sugar Creek, and there's just all kinds of pollution going down there. So the state, it took them 3 or 4 tries. They mandated that Bloomington Normal do something. And for a while, Bloomington Normal refused. Eventually, the state created the Bloomington Normal Water Reclamation District to handle the wastewater coming out of both Bloomington and Normal. And since that time, Downs joined the system probably 15 to 20 years ago. And those 3 towns make up the Bloomington Normal Water Reclamation District. Not 100% of Bloomington is on the Benward system. There are some parts of Bloomington and or Normal that still have septic tanks. Septic fields just like us. They're working to get those additional areas added also. So, but their job is to collect the wastewater from Bloomington, Normal, and Downs and to treat it. Bloomington, Normal, and Downs own the collection systems in their town, and they feed into some major collection lines that Benward maintains and owns. Benward owns the treatment facilities, and they have been working to expand and become available for smaller communities to become what they call a regional system. Right now, they just serve the 3 towns, but it's possible Towanda, Hudson, Carlock, and probably a couple other smaller communities in the area may also eventually be able to join Benward and get all their sewage treated there. EPA thinks bigger is better. So EPA is very in favor of regionalization of sewage systems, so. The revenue for Benward comes from multiple places. They have a monthly charge based on the amount of water you use that we put back into the system. They have an annual charge that goes to Bloomington Normal residents as part of their property tax. The annual charge is about $120 a year on a $200,000 house. So got a $300,000 house, you're looking at $180 a year for that. Got a $100,000 house, it'd be $60,000. And the monthly charges we'll get into shortly. So make sure I'm not. I have a tendency to talk too much without looking at my notes. So second here. Okay. Go to the next. Go to the second one. Okay. If you can expand it a little bit, it'll make it easier for the audience to review. This is a map of north of Normal. It includes Brant and Nussbaum and Hudson. And you can see Hudson's at the top of the map. You put a label there called Hudson. Going down the map, the road just below Hudson is East 2100 North Road. That is at the southern end of Prairie View. If it kept going east-west, it would go to the southern edge of Prairie View. The next road down is the East 2000 North Road. And the green line that goes across the East 2000 North Road is Benward's proposed expansion. They want to build a square around Bloomington to provide them with flexibility and backup. And they would come as far north as East 2000 North. That would put them a mile from the southern edge of Hudson. So if they build that, and if we go with the sewer system, we would have about a mile to pump to connect to Benward. The below East 2000 North Road shows Brant and Nussbaum. And you've probably seen those from the interstate or driven by Brant Industries and Nussbaum Trucking. Currently do not have any sewer service. And Nussbaum is not Nussbaum. Benward and Normal are working to get sewer service that far. So the green line at the East 2000 North Road shows going east-west. It would go a mile west of Interstate 39 and then go south. My understanding is that they may, after they get lines up to Brant or Nussbaum, that they may go straight north from there to get to East 2000 North Road. So the exact routes for Bloomington Normal Water Reclamation District, how they're going to grow, they're still working on it. They don't know for sure, but they do plan to come within a mile of it, out from the south end. So their timeline on that, they're looking at possibly doing that, likely doing it in 3 to 5 years. So that impacts our timeline. If the village decides to go ahead, and if we decide to use the option to connect to Benward, then our timing is going to be dependent on when they would get that expansion to it. So, next slide. Okay, we looked at 4 different options of what to do as far as different septic systems. The first option was not to do anything, and there are costs without doing anything. These are estimated 20-year costs. How many septic systems will fail in the next 20 years in Hudson, and how much money is spent on maintaining your systems, getting your tanks pumped regularly, that type of thing. It could add up to $3 million. That might be a little high, but it's definitely a lot more than zero. So the next option was regionalization, and that would be with Hudson connecting to Benward. The cost for that are probably $23,372,000. That's the cost that we're going with for our study. So the third and fourth options are building our own treatment systems. We'd have to find areas a mile or so from town to pump it to. And we could do that. We could have our own lagoon system. There's different options there, and that's options 3 and 4. Those costs are at least slightly higher, more than $1 million higher than the connecting to Benward. And the way EPA is changing standards and requiring additional testing, the regionalization is probably much more than $1 million cheaper than building our own system. The figures we have in the report show it's $23,300,000. So, and the next line, obviously, regionalization is dependent on Benward growth. We also looked at how you collect it coming from the houses to our different collection points. You could build a combination of gravity and pump stations. There's a combination of gravity and low pressure force mains. And the combination, the first option, the combination of gravity and pump stations is preferred. The low pressure force mains would require some kind of grinder pump to go into each home that would grind everything up as it left the home. And my understanding is those break quite a bit, and towns that have done that have got reams and bunches of those in stocked up so that when they break, they can go out and replace them. That is not the option we wanted to go with. We wanted to go with the gravity and the pump stations. The pump stations can be built with 2 pumps. So if one pump fails or needs maintenance, the other pump could do the work. You can put generators by the pumps so that they can be powered if there's no electricity, and the stations that we are designing have a capacity to hold up to 10 to 12 hours of sewage before they would need to be pumped, before the generator would need to kick on and pump. So we think we've got a pretty good system designed that should be safe and not allow any backups into the home. So the price is higher going that way, but we think it's the best way to go. And when you build a sewer system, you want to do it right the first time. If you try and retrofit it, you just run into all kinds of headaches and additional costs. So if you can do it right the first time, that's the way you want to do it. So like a lot of things. So next slide, please. Okay. Talk a minute about financing and some of the grants and loans. I earlier mentioned that the Illinois EPA has a grant program right now for unserved communities to build that would pay $5 million out of your total cost. The USDA, Department of Agriculture, the RD section, which is the Rural Development section, also has a grant program. And we feel, after talking to them, we're pretty confident that we could get $2 million of a grant through USDA RD. So USDA RD also has a guideline as far as the maximum monthly payment that communities should have if they implement a sewer system. And I'll get into that in a minute. I'm getting off track here. The bottom of this note right here, the final connection costs, there are a lot of different ways that this projects can be completed in different communities. We've heard some communities have had a final connection cost of $15,000 to $30,000, some $5,000. The way Greg, our engineer, has designed this is most everything except for the last 5 feet of connection would be paid for through the construction grant, through the actual construction loans and grants that we're gonna get. So we would run pipes within 5 feet of where your sewer line comes out of your house now. And all that's gonna be paid for by all of us, but it's gonna be spread out over a 40-year period. So the final bill that you should have to actually connect to the sewer line that gets ran during construction would be, we're estimating $400, $300 or $400, somewhere in that time frame. So we think that's a lot more palatable to have a connection and a charge of $300 or $400 than thousands of dollars that some communities have. So it's easier to pay that off over 40 years than it is immediately when you connect. All right, next slide. Okay, so USDA Rural Development has a guideline of payments. Average payments should not exceed 1.5% of the median household income. So our median household income in Hudson is $82,500. 1.5% of that is $103.12 a month. So we have to get the sewer bills to at least that low before we'll do anything, before we can get all the financing that we need. So based on our water usage that we use today, and based on what Benward charges today, the monthly bill for the treatment of your wastewater would be a little less than $20 a month. The chart shows $19.26 a month. Of the payment that you would make every month that would go to Benward. I mean, you're gonna pay one bill to Hudson, but Hudson is gonna turn around and write Benward a check for an average of about $20 a month per resident. Now, that is an average. Those of you that have got 4 kids that are gonna use a lot more water than those of us that our kids are growing and going. So the 1926 is based on 6,000 gallons of water a month. I believe my water bill for my wife and I, until we had the drought this spring, was about $3,000 to $4,000, 3,000 or 4,000 gallons a month. I'm sure it went up noticeably, this spring when it got real dry, but it's back down in that range again now. Yes?
You made reference to per resident, not per household?
That's per household, I'm sorry. Did I say residence? Okay, it is per household. The 1926 for each household. We have between 600 and 700 bills that we send out every month, our water bills, so it's per water bill. So I apologize for that. So USDA RD says the most we can pay is $103.12 a month. We take $20 off of that for our monthly bill. That leaves $83.86 a month to pay for debt. So looking at the $23 million cost to build this without any financing or grants from EPA or RD, we'd be looking at a cost of $125 to $160 a month. Nobody wants to pay that. So And we are trying to get some information on what different communities pay for each month for their sewer study. Yes,
It's 150 construction costs or construction costs plus treatment?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question.
It's the 150 construction costs alone for 100, or construction costs plus treatment?
That would be both, 125 to 160 would be both. And if anybody's interested, the sewer study that's done, as well as the PowerPoint tonight, are both available on our village website if you want to download it. Yes,
That total would include garbage and water like it does today, or that would be in addition to that total?
my hearing is terrible, so would you please come up to our mic?
That total that you just gave, 125 to 160 would be in addition to garbage and water?
Correct.
Or including that?
That is not including garbage and water, that is sewer only.
Thank you.
Yep. So, and we'll have a good question and answer session when this is all done too, so. The pricing gets a little confusing, so I'm working on trying to get that more clear as we go. So we have to get below $103 per household a month. The more we get below that, the happier we'll be.
You're saying you can't charge the residents over $103.12 a month?
No, that is the USDA guidelines. And, you know, $100 a month for sewer is, I haven't looked at what other communities pay. I've looked at a few in McLean County and they're well below that. But they are not paying, most of the towns have had their systems in and are not paying debt anymore on the building. No, they're just paying maintenance. So the 103 is what Greg and I are working towards getting below. The board has not said that's a bullet or a stopping point or anything, but we want to be able to come to the board and say, yeah, we can get below the guideline that USDA has. So.
Are you saying though, it still could be 125 to 160?
If we go ahead and we did not get any grants, yes, it would be between 125 and 160 a month.
And when do you find out about these grants? Not until you apply for them? You don't know if you're gonna get them?
Well, we're not 100% sure we can get them until we say, yeah, we're gonna go for it, but we can be pretty sure of some of it. We are confident with the people we've talked to at EPA that we would get the $5 million construction grant for that. Greg has talked to USDA RD and he's pretty confident we can get the $2 million construction grant from USDA RD. There are other places and the report lists about 10 other places here. Of potential financing, a lot of them we don't qualify for because our MHI is high. Medium household income is high. And what I imagine we'll probably do, and I have not checked with legal to see how we can do this, but I think what I personally would like to be able to do is say, yeah, we're gonna go ahead and do this and we can get enough financing. I don't know whether legally we can do that or not. So we'll work on that. Yes,
The 125 to 160 figure though, is already taken into account to get the 5 million, right?
it takes into account,
It's already taken into account that you're getting 5 million off
No.
23. So
no, that's if we don't get any grants at all. And the next slide here in a minute will show you where we're at with that, so. So, we all knew this was gonna be an expensive project, but without a study, which is where we're at right now, we have no idea how expensive. So we're trying to get the data and we're trying to make it available to everyone, so you have an opportunity to talk to your trustees and let them know what you think. We're really working at getting the word out. That's why we're having these meetings now, so, status, so. Okay, the next page. The Next page, okay, I think I misquoted my answer to the gentleman in back there. The $165 a month would be if we get the $5 million EPA grant, and that's all we got, then we would be paying $165 a month,
For 40 years?
40 years. These are 40-year loans and 40-year loans that we'd be looking at. The EPA loan would be a 20-year loan, and that's why the first two numbers, even though there's a $2 million grant added, the 20-year loan is like 165 in, I wish Greg was here because he could confirm this. The next figure we show with $164 a month is with a USDA. If all we got was the USDA grant, the $2 million grant, because now we're looking at 40 years, the monthly payment would still be $164 a month. Smaller grant, but the payment's about the same because we're looking at 40 years instead of 20 years. Okay, if we add those two grants together, which we think we can get, then the total price was $23,300,000. Our loan would be $16,372,000, which would result in a monthly cost for debt payment and for water usage of $133.18. And that's still over the $103 that we want to shoot for.
That's for 20 or 40 years. 20 or 40 years.
40 years. The only one that's 20 years is the first one on there with just Illinois EPA. They do 20-year loans, and occasionally they can do 30, but for the most part, they just do 20-year loans, where the RD loans are 40 years. These are low interest loans too. So there's a space in the middle of the table, then we can come up with another $5 million grant. Then the monthly cost will go down to $101.37. We can come up with a $7,500,000 grant. Our monthly bills are down to $85.46. We can come up with an additional $10 million, then our monthly bills are down to $69. And obviously, the more grant money we can come up with, the better it is for our monthly sewer bills. So,
Where did those grants come from?
the additional grants,
Yeah, the 5, 10, 5, 35.
those are, in the report here, there's about 8 different possible sources of grants. I'll wait till Greg gets here, he can talk about that. The most likely place for additional grant money is from hitting up our representatives and senators at both the state and federal level and saying, here's where we're at with this project and we need some grant money and we're requesting it. And that is, in my opinion, that's the most likely source of where we're gonna be able to get that much additional grant money. I am not an expert at this. I'm learning as we go. So I can't tell you what the odds are. I mean, I don't think anybody can. So,
Is the plan to go ahead with it no matter what you get?
well, no, what I hope we can do, and I have to check with legal, my hope is that we can proceed and our next step is to secure our funding. And if we can't secure enough funding to get the bills down, then maybe we pend it for a couple years or drop it or keep working on funding until we get enough to make the costs below the $103 a month. That would be my personal opinion as far as what we ought to do. The board is the one that will make that decision, and there's a lot of board members here tonight. So I hope you will feel free to make your comments tonight about going on with this, or whatever your thoughts are, is what you need, so. Okay, so our next step with the study, and if Greg gets here, as I'm finishing this up, that'd be perfect timing. Our next steps are to conduct our public meetings and our public hearings, and tonight is one of these meetings. We're getting the word out on, here's where we're at with the study. We need input from our residents as far as, do they think we ought to go ahead? Or, we need your feedback. We need to find out what citizens are thinking. If we proceed, the Illinois EPA will start reviewing our initial document that our engineers put together on what our costs and options were, what our preferred connection is. And if we do proceed, the actual bill for Hudson will probably be about 1.5 years. And we obviously are dependent on timing for Benward if we connect to them, which would be 3 or 5 years out. So I would guess that it would be, my guess would be 5 years before, we'd be on a sewer system if we decided to go ahead now or within the next year. I also found out that we do not have to start making payments on our loans until after the sewer systems are completed. So it's unlikely that the village is going to need to start collecting money for a sewer system tomorrow. I think most of that can wait until the sewer system is up and operational. Yes.
Will the interest accrue when we're using the money and?
Okay, so my hearing is terrible, so I'm gonna ask everybody to come up to the microphone now.
Just a quick question, would the interest accrue, during that period of time with the
Oh,
loan?
yes, it always,
So
every
that's
loan, it improves.
But so that's gonna really increase our costs as well. in paying-
Well, I mean,
paying it
the
off.
figures we've got here include that,
Does it? Okay.
yeah.
How will we be engaging the community to get the feedback to the board?
Meetings are one thing,
Well, these meetings are no useless because you can see the attendance isn't that great, so we can't use that. These are over, so something going forward is gonna have to take place.
what do you suggest we do?
We get a water bill every month, put a note on there. But we have to have something that engages the majority of the community.
Okay,
I mean, we know a lot of people don't pay attention to the quill to get these meetings. So
yeah, we realize that.
so that's why I'm saying we can't use these meetings as a gauge.
Yeah, we were gonna put a note on the water bill, but I missed the cutoff. We were printing them already for the next water bill. We do have another meeting in September, and if we need to, we'll have a meeting in October.
So when does,
Get it out.
I was gonna say, so when does the feedback need to be received to the board? Then, how quick does that need to occur? For the community feedback to reach the board?
Well, you can start that tonight. You can talk to
No,
any board member at any time. You can email them.
No, I get that, but but since, again, 3 meetings have already occurred. No, if the next one's September and the board needs to hear it by August, that meeting's too late, so.
There are no deadlines or timelines on when the board has to act. I'm sure the EPA grants will not be available forever, but I don't think a few months is gonna make any difference if we need a few more months for more meetings.
So when does the board look to be making their decision then?
We haven't talked about it. I hope we can make a decision within a couple months.
So, I think we definitely need to have a drive of some kind to get this word out to the average resident.
So how did you find out about
I pay attention to the government stuff.
it? Okay,
I read the quill, I read the minutes of the all meetings.
that point was also
I wish
brought up.
everybody else would do that, but I can't for them to do that.
That point was brought up at our last meeting, and so we do have a phone messaging system that we use when we implement a parking ban. And we sent out a message on that, that gets to, what, a quarter?
We're actually, about 2/3 of the residents are signed up, so we got to about 450.
So I mean, that's a good start.
And then our plan is to put it on the September water bill for the September meeting.
Okay.
It will be on there as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so
We
that
did
sounds
that
like those
last
are two good items that, as long as that work gets out and people have an opportunity before the board makes their decision. So
And we have stuck up a few flyers around town also,
that's, I mean, that's good to hear.
so. I should have thought of the water bill early on, but we didn't, so. And the public hearings have to be published in a newspaper. It goes to the community, so we
Well,
have.
it's not, that's what I said, it's not like you guys are at fault for not communicating it, because again, it's in the quill. I wish more people would pay attention to the meetings and stuff, but I know they don't, so.
I understand.
Can we add a direct mailer? Like a mass mailer to the postal
If
service?
you get it on the water bill, everybody gets that, so.
I don't read that. I like that.
What about a referendum? We have a financial commitment for 40 years. I think the citizens of Hudson should have a vote.
I agree.
This needs to be voted on.
I agree. It should be on the ballot and everybody should have a vote on it. We shouldn't allow the board to take and make this decision.
It's a
But
big
every-
decision.
Every citizen should have a vote in it, and the majority should rule on that.
When I talked to our attorney about that, his answer was it could be a non-binding referendum, but the board would be the one making the decision. So I will double check that with him. It could be a non-binding referendum type thing on the ballot as far as I know now. So. Yes,
Why couldn't it be binding referendum?
I do not understand laws. I've tried to read laws on the Illinois websites and I just get confused. I cannot explain the legal aspects of things. So, and I will double check that to make sure I understood it correctly.
Maybe we could ask our attorney to, the next meeting, where he could address such a question.
Yeah, we could. He comes to our regular meetings and that's been the only question so far that really came up for our attorney. So we're trying to save the village some money by not having it come to all of our meetings, so yes.
I would suggest a Google form survey where the link is on the website, and the link could also be printed on the water bills, to go to this Google form that asks and gives this information, and then asks, you know, our citizens, you know, they get their comments on that Google form. And you can get information just go dumped right into a spreadsheet from the Google form. And then it also gives you a pie chart.
I have not worked with that myself. What I don't know is there anything, a way to prevent multiple people or one person
Well, you
from
would give
doing
an,
multiple answers?
yeah, you would give an email address usually, you know, as a verification, or your name. I mean, you don't have to, I mean, did you want it anonymous? I don't know, but you give an email address, so that would prevent, you can check to make sure there's not 2 email addresses of the same answering it. Everybody should have a separate one. We could talk about it, I know those things if you want.
When you come up to comment, you just state your name for the minutes, please.
I'm sorry, yes, you need your names.
Hi, my name is Catherine Porter, and that's all. Thank you for putting all this together. This is a lot of work, and I appreciate it. I guess I just have sort of a series of questions. Was the impetus of this sewer project was it the opportunity because Bloomington was moving their system out here and we saw it as an opportunity? Or was it, we were scared because maybe EPA is gonna come in and do the same thing they did with other communities? I guess I'm trying to figure out how did it all start?
I think as much as anyone prompted the study. I thought it had been talked about for a long time. I thought it might be something to actually study. And Bloomington or Benward growing happened to be incidental. I didn't even realize that when we contacted them to start getting information as far as what our options were with collecting with them. So that was not a driving point in this at all. Again, as far as I know, EPA is not putting any pressure on us to act today. I would think if they were, I would know, I would hope.
Well, and I guess my other question was, as far as funding, we have grants that we could apply for, and I understand the process is you can only apply for the grant when you decided to do the project, so, and that makes sense with any grant. But if we had additional sales tax revenue, if we had additional businesses in town, would that help to defer the cost of some of this?
It would depend on additional businesses, yes. I mean, the more homes that we get in and the more businesses we get in, then the debt has more people paying on it. So, and we figured out, what was it, every 10 additional households, I think, would decrease our monthly charge by $2 on the debt portion. So
as part of the strategy, then, if this is a go, part of the strategy to figure out how to build more homes, there's a housing crisis in Bloomington Normal anyway. You know, would that be something that the board would work on so that we could have a growth plan too?
yes, we do have a 10-year plan, and we are currently trying to add the areas that we think Hudson should grow in to that plan. It's not in that plan today, but that's what we're working on. So, yes.
Steve Gregory. A question for the lawyer, for the attorney, is the board empowered to commit to a $24 million expenditure on behalf of the citizens? Do the bylaws and everything allow the board to make that kind of commitment without a referendum, or what's the limit that the board can commit to?
I'll find out if there is one. So I honestly don't know. So we need to know, is there a limit on what the board can commit to without a referendum? Right. I'll find out. And I will clarify with him that it can only be done through a board decision and not a referendum would be non-binding. I'll verify that.
Mayor, this is Q and A or no?
Yeah, this is Q&A.
Okay.
So would like everyone to come up.
We had more time to cover, I didn't wanna jump in front of you guys.
No.
All right, thank you, Mayor, I appreciate it, what you're doing here. There's a lot of people behind me who are asking about, well, can we go and knock on everybody's door? Can we tattoo their left, rear, right? We can do whatever we want as a city to tell people. If they don't wanna come, they don't wanna engage with their city, you could waste all of our money sending 1,000 mailers, posting it 12,000 times in the paper, again, stamping everybody's front driveway with "come to the city meeting." It's not gonna make a difference. That's my own opinion. I know people disagree with me. Hopefully you'll take that into consideration. I have a couple of questions. You mentioned Brandt and New Spawn are going to be extensions from Binward. Are we gonna be subsidizing their costs to connect to Binward, or are they going to be paying a substantial portion of Binward expanding to theirs and then us connecting to that?
We will not have any cost if we don't connect to Binward. So
From them, right? But if we connect to Binward, are we gonna be paying to go all the way to North Normal or to go to New Spawn and Brandt? You see what I'm saying?
Sure. No.
Like, those companies making billions of dollars should probably pay a little more than
We
the
would
residents of
pay
Hudson.
to go to the East 2000 road, just 1 mile of it.
None of that sewer is going to be part of the Hudson project in any way, financially or detail wise. That's all being constructed, designed and constructed by Binward, independent of what Hudson does.
Okay. So the costs that we have quoted now are given current inflation, administrations, given regulatory as it is now, right? If we apply for our loans and we get 7 million, which is what it seems like is kind of a confirmed amount, or you can't say that, but that's what I can infer. We won't be able to, I think what you said is we won't be able to build for 3 to 5 years. So there could either be no more loans in 3 to 5 years, or there could be triple loans in 3 to 5 years. The question I have is, would we apply for those loans now, be granted those loans? If Benward didn't get to us for 5 years, we would still be guaranteed that financial assistance, or no? It depends on what they do in 5 years.
You would be, with the EPA, you would be on what they call their intended use plan. Until the construction contract is executed, the loan paperwork with EPA isn't finalized. So that's the way that works.
You mentioned having our own lagoon systems wherever in town. It seemed as though you also indicated that we could do that, pay the X cost, and then still be forced to connect to Benward. Is that correct or not?
I'm sorry, I did not mean to imply that, no. If we had our own lagoon system, no, I'm sure that would be all we would have for a long time.
Okay. The reason I ask that is because if the EPA comes in and says we prefer these kind of aggregate, combinations of towns, et cetera, one could infer that they would want us to be a part of that too, so.
I mean, anything is possible.
Of
We all
course.
know that.
Of course,
But
yeah,
there has been no discussion from the EPA in anything I've read or
okay.
talked to them that implies they would do that.
As far as the connecting or running the pipes to the houses, I think a majority of our homes have the outlet going out the back of our homes. It seems as though you indicated 5 feet from the outlet of the house, is that right? So it would have to then go around the house, presumably to the front or out the back through our septic, et cetera. So what's going to be the cost, or who's gonna incur the cost if, while you're putting that pipe 5 feet from our home, you disrupt our current septic, and now we have nothing to use?
I'm not an expert, we should be able to go around what you got today.
That's what the intent would be.
Okay.
We'd have, if there was any doubt as to where that system existed, we've done that before where we've circumvented the existing system, kept that functional. If in fact they were ready to add the service line, you're within a day of being connected. Now, the system may not be functional at that moment, so the contractor would have to be, and the village, the engineer would have to be certain as to what level of risk we would tolerate at that moment.
Okay. Obviously, the town, we have a permit structure or permit process, right? Permitted sheds, permitted outbuildings, pools, whatever. Who would be responsible for moving those permitted structures, or would it be going around those permitted structures? Obviously, if we follow the town of Hudson's regulations and bylaws to put our structure there. Now, obviously, if we didn't, that's another story, but if we went through the proper processes, would that be something you guys took into consideration, or would you be going right through my shed?
We would have to work around a structure that was allowed to be in place.
Okay.
And all those details would be finalized in the design.
Okay. this just came up. Are you the one that would be doing the work in your company, or are you an independent third party that would be giving us this quote, doing this study, et cetera?
We have been authorized to do this phase of the work. We're anticipating we would be authorized to do the design phase, and then we would anticipate we would be authorized to do the construction phase.
Okay.
You mean the supervision? His company would not be actually
Correct,
doing the
correct.
construction.
That's my question, right? Are you gonna be the one we're paying over the next 40 years?
No,
And so
no.
what we're viewing is
No, that's
is benefiting you, is I guess my question.
no, that's,
Okay,
we're a third party in this mix. The project would be competitively bid, awarded to presumably the lowest bid, and then that would be the contractor who would actually construct the system.
one question I see on Facebook all the time is, do you have to connect to the system? Or can you choose to continue with your current septic? And if it fails, at that point, you can connect to the system.
My opinion, and this will be a trustee decision, but my recommendation would be, you're gonna get billed whether you connect or not. So it would be logical to have everybody connect at the time. Because if only half the residents in town would connect, then everything is shot as far as the building site calculations go. So my recommendation would be, yes, everybody has to connect.
And that's where I was going, right? Generally, I'm supportive of this. I think it's good. I think if we could do what you indicated, which was see if we can get the grants, see if we can go petition our Congress people. I would ask you to challenge yourself as a politician, if you would need my help. If you would need my assistance, I'm gladly willing to offer any assistance you may need to go petition whoever you need. I like to pride myself as being able to talk to anybody at any point, at any time. But why are we limiting ourselves or capping ourselves to 5, 10 million? Should we not start with the premise of pay for all of it through one of these grants, and maybe they'll give us 10 million or 5 million, right? I'm just, explore your own mindset there. Don't limit us to just
And
5 or 10.
You also run the risk, if you ask for all of it, you may not get any.
That's true. That is true.
The line for entities asking for all the funds is very, very long. The line for entities that have some skin in the game and are willing to contribute and self-finance is shorter. So, and some of the grant programs have local match requirements.
Okay. So you said it a couple times this evening, and I've read it several times on the public sites, et cetera, that if we wait, the subsidies won't be there.
No,
Could it also
they're
be
less
true?
likely to be
I was
there.
gonna say, could it also be true that if we wait, that there will be more, given whatever the state of people's climate change fears and things of that nature? Could it be true that it would be more, right?
Let me pull my crystal ball.
I'm just saying.
Anything's possible, yes. Yeah, there
I'm
could be
just
more,
asking
there
the
could be
question.
less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's unknown at this point.
Right.
What it could or couldn't be.
Right.
Okay. My last question is that I hear a lot on social media that, oh, this is going to be great because it'll solve the issue on the south end of town. Are you, as our mayor, and whoever here is from the board, this is the first meeting I've attended, so I don't really know who our board is, to be completely honest with you. Are you going to commit to our residents that the same home builders that you answered, I believe it was her question on, that we want to bring in, are going to be more responsible than the home builders that got us into the mess on the south end of town? With this particular stuff that's going on, right? I mean,
Part of the process in putting in a sanitary sewer system is the village will have a sewer use ordinance that's very extensive. And the components of that sewer use ordinance would be very detailed, very restrictive on anything that would compromise the village's sewer system in the future. One of the things that occurs with a sanitary sewer system of the nature that Hudson is considering is that inflow from sources that aren't supposed to be there still flows to Binward, and the village gets charged for that. So very sloppy work by a contractor in the future that would feed into the system that the village builds would be very detrimental. So there would be very specific construction details that would be required of the contractors that would be then constructing their own collection system to feed into the villages and then dedicating that system to the village.
Are we planning on hiring somebody to uphold that sewer guidelines, those sewer prerequisites that are going to be inspecting these buildings that today? I love Denny to death. I think he's great, but I'm not exactly sure that he's an expert on sewer systems. I don't know him well enough, but are we gonna hire somebody that's going to uphold these standards? Because I could write a piece of paper all I want, but if I'm not gonna uphold them, it's only as good as the paper it's written on. So can you commit to us that somebody that's qualified for that position to uphold our standards that this gentleman seems that he will be providing us there will be a qualified person in that.
During the construction of the Elway system in Hudson, if we build one, yes.
If we
I
build
will
one, if a
commit
new
that
builder
the
comes
engineering-
in and builds 100 homes and
Now, that, I can't tell you what's gonna happen there, again, I won't be mayor when that happens. So I can tell you yes, I can tell you no, it's gonna be up to the board, the future board, to ensure that we have staff to inspect, things like that.
The way that process works now is that there's the permit process, and plans and specifications for a subdivision would be submitted to the village for review and approval. Somebody, yes, is still gonna have to go out.
what about Binward? Would they have to sign off on it too?
No, the village would be independent of that. They would have their own system, and they would be paying for the disposal treatment of the sewage that comes out of the village.
I do wanna add too that, Danny knows we're not good at, commercial inspections. And so we hire commercial inspectors to come out for like Dollar General and different commercial buildings. So I'm confident that if we need to hire inspectors for a sewer system, we would do that. I can't promise it.
Last but not least, I just want to express my own personal feeling that I've lived in Normal, I've lived in Bloomington for many years. The reason my family and I came to Hudson was because of the small town feel. Because we are I'm a Chicago boy, so we are in the middle of nowhere, right? I see a lot of people on Facebook, I hear it in town. This will be great because we can attract all these new businesses, we'll have all these new homes. I don't want to become North Normal. I want to stay Hudson. So I just think as our mayor currently and as our board, whoever's here, keep that in mind that yes, we want to attract. I would ask you in your paperwork, some of the positives are we will attract. There's a lot of people who think those are actually negatives. So if you could just take that into consideration when drafting your paperwork, that might help in the selling of this to the community, right? Yes, we may incur costs as a community, but we've incurred a lot as a community over the years from what my in-laws have stated, who've lived here their entire life, to me, who've lived here for now, I think 7 or 8 years. And so I just hope you take that into consideration. I have a tremendous amount of respect for the position you were in, that this is not easy. It's not an easy decision, or it would have been made by now. So thank you. I appreciate you guys holding these, and I'll be at the next one probably to just hear you out more. Thank you, guys.
Come back to any more and ask great questions, so.
Excuse me, sir, what was your name?
I apologize. Mitchell Tilke, Tielke.
Okay,
Me again. Lauren Evans, and I have here a copy of the proposed sewer diagram. And my question is, could we get, or could we look into having the sewers put in the streets? And one of the reasons why I'm so concerned about that is the possibility of blastomycosis and other fungal and mold infections that you're going to put in our air to be inhaled by people who have already physical issues. And for a year and a half, it's not going to be just like a one-time thing. It's going to be day after day after day of placing this sewer system in an area that could possibly expose people to dangerous molds and funguses. Our air quality already is not real good because of other influences. Number 4th, Illinois is number 4th in the nation of bad air quality. And I would like to see if we have to put it in, that we do it as safe for the animals, for the people in this community, for their health and welfare. Thank you.
Thank you. Greg, is there a rule of thumb that if you put the main sewer runs in under the street instead of the yards, is it same cost, is it twice as much?
It's significantly more expensive. I don't believe it's twice, but it could be if we have a brand new asphalt or concrete street and we have to replace that in kind. Those costs are significantly more than surface restoration in a vegetated area.
We will be working with EPA also on anything we do, so.
I think in what there's in the street.
Sorry.
I talked to the sewer person in Lexington, he put his in the street to prevent any kind of issue. I don't know why we can't look at that too. I don't know what you put the cost on your life, but I know a dog that died of blastomycosis. I have 2 friends that had it, and they've had years of treatment. Is the board gonna pay for my hospitalization and treatment when I actually get it because we put it in the air?
Thank you.
Andy Patton. I'd like to add to.
Can you give Allison your name?
Yeah, Andy Patton.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'd like to add to my concern about putting it in between the 2 yards. I happen to live on the first expansion area up on Washington. And the proposal looks like you're gonna put it between the house on Washington and East Street, as well as other backyards. To the gentleman's comment earlier, you're gonna be tearing through one of our backyards, or are you gonna go down the property line, which then means we either can't put in fences, or you're gonna tear out the fences and you're gonna have to put the fences back. Anyway, my concern would be, let's put it in the street. That way, in the future, if we have maintenance that needs to be done, heavy equipment needs to be taken into my backyard, you're gonna once again either have to destroy my fences to get there, or the neighbor from behind, or access to the manholes, et cetera, et cetera. I'm here as a citizen, but I also happen to be on the fire department, and I'm gonna bring up an idea. I have other questions, but since we're in placement, this is probably not gonna be very popular. My understanding is that our water mains are less than sizable in diameter for water flow. We've all probably experienced, and I realize this is a sewer meeting, not a water meeting, but if we're gonna consider putting the sewers in the streets, maybe it'd be a good time to put in new updated water mains. My understanding is some of our water mains are 3-inch-ish. Again,
We have Bill, what do we have, about 6 to 10 blocks of 3-inch main, maybe 14? Yeah.
so again, I'm not the expert, I don't know exactly. We've all experienced water pressure issues. At least we do at my home. And I realize it's dependent upon how full the water tower is. And my understanding is we don't have pumps on the supply side of the water tower to boost pressure. Okay, and maybe an offline discussion could be had better on this topic. But if we decide as a community to put the sewer in the streets and we're tearing them up anyway, it might be a good time to consider upgrading there. Anyway, so some of my other questions, you had mentioned, Dave, sales tax revenues. You mentioned too, we have several businesses in town. Are there any businesses in town that do not generate sales revenue for the city or village of Hudson?
Yeah, the elevator, that's agricultural related, Sun Ag, very little sales tax revenue from either of those businesses. I cannot tell anyone how much sales tax revenue an individual business generates. But those are two businesses that generate minimal sales tax revenue.
Sure, I understand. And there are other businesses that, all the rest of the businesses generate sales tax revenue, or are there any that don't? Are you familiar?
Other than those two, I can't think of any off the top of my head. Sarah, can you?
Share that according to the report that we get, Dave.
There could be some lawn service businesses that don't. I mean, there are.
I was thinking commercial businesses that are connected to our city and other services, you know, such as water.
Yeah, I'm not sure barber shops are taxed. You know, it's whatever the state regulates as far as sales tax goes.
So one of the concerns that was talked about earlier were backups that Bloomington Normal has experienced. Since we're going to be installing our own system, we're going to have at least a mile and a half of connection, probably going to have a lift station. Will that lift station help prevent us from getting any of their backup from their system, even though maybe we will in our own system, but not accumulating any of their stuff into ours?
Short answer is yes.
Okay, okay. So that's something that, once we connect, we don't have to worry about backflow from them. It's only within our own system and in our own homes from.
That's correct.
Okay.
And their issues primarily are due to what's termed I&I, inflow and infiltration, all right? And it's basically water that shouldn't be going in there. Storm water, some pump water, various elements like that.
Which brings up a good point. I can't imagine any of us currently have our sump pumps tied into our septic systems, but when the connection is made to our homes, will there be an inspection for just those things at that time?
Yes.
Okay.
And that will be part of the sewer use ordinance. So any new elements coming in to the village would, you know, to be constructed, would have that prohibition.
Would there also be provision at time of a home sale where an inspection would be made to verify again that those two are not connected?
That certainly could be part of the sewer use ordinance. Periodic inspection could be part of it. If a run seems to have issues with peaking during a rain event like today, all right? I mean, it's pretty easy to tell when that happens because A sump pump puts out considerably more water than a boil.
Sure. Does Benward today have the capacity to add us and possibly Carlock, as you mentioned? Thinking possibly Hayworth coming north.
Yeah, we're like a small new subdivision.
Okay.
From Bloomington normal.
For their current capacity, what if they start adding, like Hayworth or Sibley or some of these others?
We are part of their master plan.
Okay.
And as the mayor said, we are such a small fraction of what they currently treat. And they're currently in the process of doing upgrades, both for quality as well as quantity capacity.
Okay. Is that upgrade going to be passed on to all of us outside communities?
It would be passed on to all users of Benwood.
So that's a yes.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
So we wouldn't be treated any different preferentially or in a negative way.
But because there are so many users, including those in Bloomington and Normal already, the additional cost, I would hope, would be minimal to any of us as a homeowner.
It's very dilute, yes.
Okay. Could we, until the point where Benward has moved far enough north for us to connect, could we build the infrastructure in Hudson up to the point of connecting to the individual homes in preparation for when they're ready for us to connect?
Short answer again is yes. It would very likely be a coordinated construction process, and we would want to meet them at the point of handoff so that they were ready when we are ready.
You also want to consider how long you want to leave the backyard tore up with a pipe ready to be connected to your existing pipe coming out of your house. You wouldn't want to leave that open for months.
Oh, no.
So,
Yeah, no, I understand it. It might be installed and capped, and we might still be on our septic systems for months, weeks, right, a year, before they were ready, if we were ready before that, I guess was my question.
It is much more likely that Benward is going to be in a position to accept Hudson well before Hudson is in a position to discharge the Benward.
Okay. We're back to the concern of running the sewer systems through backyards between homes. Okay. Where are the current, thinking more north now, because I think where we're at now and south, most of the utilities are overhead as far as power, et cetera, et cetera. Have we taken a look at where most of the utilities are located underground on the northern additions? Because I think in my neighborhood, they're between the two houses in my backyard. Power, phone, not that there aren't phones, but internet, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
We recognize that there are utilities in that utility corridor back there. As far as their exact position and depth with a Julie locate of that detail, no, that has not been done yet. That is part of the final design.
Yeah. So again, concern being, if that's where most of the current utilities are now, even though there might be an additional upfront cost to put it in the streets, we don't have utilities in the streets today in most of the areas. And I think in the northern additional housing developments, we also don't have alleys like exist on the south side. I would hope on the south side, the alleys are probably utilized for sewer system, I would suspect.
That is correct.
Okay.
there should be some type of right of way though on the north side of the village between the lots.
The intent in the preliminary design is to use the path of least resistance and least cost. So in spite of having to minimize conflicts with the existing utilities, that is very likely going to be a least cost scenario than placing things in the street. Now, if it turns out that that isn't the case in final design, the design would move to a different location. It's really only two choices, the front of the house or the back of the house.
Yeah, right, yeah. And to the comment earlier, depending on the size of our lots, I suspect, and the position of where the septic systems were placed, you know, we might end up having pipes like this coming into our house rather than, you know, in like such to connect to get around our existing fields and tanks and
Sheds, and pools and decks and everything else.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
and power lines that, you know, feed up, you know, power is the most concern for us in my particular situation. And this might be in the design stage that we're not in yet. In the numbers we're seeing, is the system designed for the potential type of growth that we possibly want to see in homes and or businesses? In other words, are the pipes big enough to handle enough of this stuff?
But they are based on the growth characteristics, the population characteristics that the village is anticipating. The village is not going to double in the next 10 years, and
No.
nobody really wants that, and the system would not be designed to accommodate that.
Right.
But it would handle the anticipated growth that the village is thinking is going to occur.
So I think all of us would agree that if we're gonna do it, yeah, it might cost a little more, but let's do it right once, instead of have to go back and fix what we should have already known better to do in the first one. Thank you for your time, appreciate what you're doing to get us some answers. Thank you.
Questions, thank you. But you're going to the mic.
Sorry.
Russ Waller. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate the opportunity to talk some more and get some issues resolved. Greg, sorry to have a bunch of problems getting up there, but glad you made it. Do have a few questions for you. So the report, which I've been through pretty thoroughly, you did a lot of evaluation of different options, which is great. That's definitely a good way to look at the situation. A question I have is for the actual gravity sewer system, did you evaluate different layouts, different options, looking obviously for the most cost-effective option? You did that, and wind up with the final design that's shown in the plans?
This is not a final design.
But
of the
I
plans.
know it's not final, but did you at least look at a couple of options, kind of looking for that best solution?
We looked at the path of least resistance at this point. We have no clue as to where the septic systems exit the house, sanitary exits the house, and we have no clue as to where any of the connection points would be in some of the older parts of town.
Sure, and I'm asking more from a standpoint, not of missing obstacles, more of the cheapest installation from a gravity standpoint, using the natural topography of the ground, looking at that to minimize number of lift stations.
That's correct, and we did look at that from a elevation perspective.
Okay. And I've obviously not spent as much time as you have going through it. I did spend a little time looking at the layout. The one thing I noticed, and it's confusing to me, is the creek that runs through town, in the middle of the town, it's actually kind of parallel in Marion Street, but then it does jog over to the south. Almost was like a barrier. You weren't willing to cross it. Everything from that low point of town, you flow away from it. You don't bring the sewers to the low point of town. And my experience with the designs, the installation of all this is usually it's the opposite of that, is you bring those, basically you put a trunk line along the sewer or, not the sewer, trunk line along the creek, which is typically the low point of town or of the area, and then bring your other sewers and your laterals to it. And I don't see that here. I'm struggling to understand, if there's something I'm missing as to why we did that and why that was done that way.
The issue is that you are correct, the ground flows to, the slope flows to the creek. It does act as a natural divide. We avoided putting any sewers in that waterway because of the flooding issues. And what we're doing in separating the town is having a lift station on essentially either side that would carry that to the south. We wouldn't bring the southern portion of the village to the creek, all right, and then have it flow backwards. We're able to utilize gravity and the slope of the pipe to carry that to the south.
Okay. And just to play it out a little bit more, so like I said, I've spent a little time looking at it. Just what I've seen from the topography, the layout that was provided in the report. And I know you're not gonna put a sewer trunk line directly in the creek, usually they're offset, but you get close as you can. And still.
The problem with that is now we're on private property.
Okay, understand that, but that can be handled with easements and stuff like that, but I'm still looking from a cost-effective standpoint. So getting that sewers to the low point, trunk line in the low point, run everything basically westerly over toward the interstate to the low point of the town, which is basically at the interstate, put in a lift station there, a lift station there, a lift station over at Prairie View. I've now reduced this entire design from 6 lift stations.
Not a design. It's not a design.
Understand, just preliminary, and I'm talking what I've done is preliminary as well. But my point in all of this is, we have 6 lift stations proposed for the village. The city of Bloomington, in that vastly different size, only has 6 lift stations, active current sewage lift stations for the entire community. So you're basically putting 6 lift stations in the village. May be required, may be necessary, but I think maybe a little more analysis, looking for ways to reduce that, because to me, logically, where if the city of Bloomington only has 6, the size of that community, we have to put 6 for the size of our community, just seems there's something missing there.
Again, that analysis is termed final design. I can't stress that enough.
I understand that, so I think all along I've been basically up here trying to make sure that the numbers we're presenting, the cost to the community, we're looking at as close as we can get. I know they're estimates, I know that this is not final design, but making a big decision like this, some of the things I've been talking about, the number of lift stations is going to have a major impact on the actual final cost. Hopefully some of the stuff I've talked about could bring it down. Some of the stuff might raise it. So that's my whole point, is trying to get that out, that I think my concerns with the cost, looking at it from my perspective, is concerning enough that maybe a step back, reevaluating some of these issues, looking a little closer to make sure that the numbers that we're talking about, the numbers we're gonna basically expect people to pay on a monthly basis are pretty accurate. And that's my whole point with that. So, understand, appreciate it, thank you.
Do we have anyone else?
Let's have some other questions. He made a point about 6 lift stations versus 2 lift stations. I apologize to the person who designed this system. I don't know your name, I'm sorry.
Greg.
Greg, thank you.
My name is Greg Gustafson,
Sorry.
and I apologize to the group for being late.
It's all right. So Greg, to this gentleman's question, if the reduction from 6 to 2, right, whatever that might be, is that 100,000 per lift station? Is it 1 million per lift station, right? If it's 1 million per lift station, hey, I just got you $4 million if we reduce it to two, right? You're welcome, right? Could you give me
I don't know why I didn't think of that.
Is there an estimate?
On a cost per lift station.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got some minor
Like a
lift
ballpark?
stations, we've got some major lift stations. I'd have to look and see to be accurate on exactly what number we use.
Is it in there?
It is.
Okay, I can go look there. You mentioned bringing businesses in as a part of this plan. My question is, we talk about usage, we talk about cost per household. Will places such as Casey's, Dollar General, any other businesses in town that probably triple the water output or the sewer output than common households, will they be carrying a heavier burden of the cost than a single household would?
That part of the cost will be based on the water usage. So the people that use the most water, and if we have businesses that use the most water, then
I guess what I'm asking is,
the higher sewer.
if I'm paying $165 for the cost of the system, is Casey's paying $1,000 for the cost of the system a month, or are they paying $160 as well? Because they're gonna be taxing the system triple what I'm taxing the system as far as using the sewers.
Okay, there's
Putting wear and
two
tear
parts
on
of
that.
the cost, the debt cost and the sewer cost for the use.
So both.
Yeah. For
I would expect the business to
usage,
carry
they would pay
more of that cost
based on how
than-
much they use. Where the debt portion, we haven't figured that out, that detailed yet, have we?
So the sewer use ordinance will detail all that. So
Where are we at with that development?
the sewer use ordinance?
Yeah, are you guys coming up with something to go along with this?
I mean, we will, but we haven't yet, we're not that far,
Okay.
so.
There's just a lot of promise in the sewer use ordinance, so if we don't see the sewer use ordinance, how can we express a true feeling about the sewer? Is where my mind goes.
The way the billing works, as the mayor said, is there's the debt service portion, and then there's the proportional cost based on water usage. That proportional cost and the structure of that is a political decision. So that cost.
That's why I asked you.
Yes, but
All due respect, Greg.
well, but
I'm asking the mayor.
but the village of Hudson doesn't currently have a sewer use ordinance, and so
I
they're
guess what
going
I'm
to
saying,
have to.
and I don't mean to cut you off. I guess what I'm saying, Mayor, is if we want to attract all these businesses, if we're going to ruin Hudson by attracting all these businesses, I would expect my government to say, you want to come to Hudson, you're going to pay a little bit more of the construction costs as opposed to the usage costs. As a result of wanting to come to Hudson, you are taking on that burden.
Yeah, and like Greg said, we haven't delved into that part of it. I mean, if we send out 600 water bills and 50 of them were commercial, you know, would we charge the commercial ones the same as the residential? I doubt it, but we haven't got into that. You know, the commercial could be.
It just might dispel the naysayers that are very vocal on Facebook and others. I'm just trying to give you some, again, I'm generally supportive of this. I'm just trying to bring stuff up that I hear that I'm trying to get you guys to think about and put out now. Because if you start being proactive and putting out, this is my policy position, this is where I stand on this. I stand here with businesses. Some of the people in the crowd even that may be doubting might see our politicians' perspectives on this and then accept it better than if it was different. And then in the future, when we talk about voting, we vote in the politicians who carry a same or similar perspective as whoever's in office currently. So just to ask from your constituent. The last question I have, I promise I won't take up any more time here, but has the study identified what impact to house prices there will be? And what I mean by that is, if I can buy a house in Normal for $300,000 and I'm gonna pay a $75, $100 water, sewer, garbage bill for them, which is, I've seen some crazy costs and heard some things like my average bill right now in Hudson is $50 to $55 for water and garbage, right? That's kind of an approximation. I've got a family of 2 adults and 1 child who's still in diapers, so she's not using that much water. Anyways, if I could drive 5 minutes and save almost $115, because the cost that I'm hearing, right, as a worst case scenario would be about $215, including sewer, water, and garbage as a monthly cost per family. If you don't get it down to your 103 or whatever, right? And unfortunately, I have to give my opinion based on worst case because there are no promises here, right? So if my house price, right, is based off of our small town, this is where people want to live. I think the average days on market in this town is what, half a day? Because houses are just flying off the market. Well, if now part of buying in Hudson is, oh, by the way, you got a $215 bill on top of all the other costs that you're gonna incur, right?
For 40 years.
Right. And again, I'm generally supportive, I'm just saying, it's something to think about, right? So our median income is X. Well, if now you start seeing people leave the town, right, then the rest of us that are staying are gonna incur more costs, our house prices might go down. Just something that you should consider, given towns around us that may have a decreased per month cost for the system. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sure we've all driven through small towns. Some of them are real vibrant and have done real well. Some of them have the storefronts are empty. You know, there's a lot to consider.
I'll be quick because it's shit late. Dustin Bierner. So I'm a business owner. I own Augusta Lawn Care. We started here in Hudson. We've since moved to Bloomington. But if I were to, open a business back up in Hudson, one of the things I'm going to take into consideration is expenses because 80% of my customers are already in Bloomington. I just like the small town. Obviously, I live here. That's something I'm going to take into consideration. So I've heard a couple people say like this is going to attract businesses. Well, if I have a bill that's going to be way higher by being here and I'm already further away, what's the point of moving here? Now, obviously I'm a service business, so it's a little bit different than being a storefront, but that's one thing to consider. The second thing is to consider, so I'm a pretty young homeowner, and like, it doesn't make me nervous, like the amount of money that the bill would go up, like the water bill. But like looking at how much that's gonna cost me over the course of 40 years, whether I move in town or stay here, it's a pretty big expense. And so, a lot of people my age are active on the Facebook group and probably know about this, but won't come and stand and say something. So I just wanted to put that out there. As a young homeowner, like, is it increasing the value of my house because I'm connected to a sewer system? Like, yeah, I know the clean out of the septic system is high. Putting in a new septic system is high. But am I going to get $76,000 more for my house over the course of 40 years because my house is increasing or because I have a sewer? So that's all I would say. Thank you.
I've not been able to find any studies that show house value changes for implementing a sewer system. I've looked, but I haven't been able to find anything yet. Have any other questions?
Are we doing
Got
this?
3 of you. All right.
Are we doing this as a public hearing or as a public meeting?
This tonight is a public hearing.
Here, okay.
The Illinois EPA requires that we hold public hearings for this. So we are having 2 public hearings. We are also having several public meetings. Where formats are the same. The hearing had to be advertised in a quill, and it was. And we have to meet all of the public hearing requirements. EPA may require us to have another hearing in several months from now. We don't know yet for sure. So.
My name's Jeff Emmert. I live at 204 South Washington here in Hudson. I've lived in the village of Hudson since 1978 when I moved here with my parents. Time we moved up here, population sign at the edge of town said 680. Been here for 45 years, and we're now at 2,000. Not a real great increase. I believe Hudson is too close to look to normal. We're a bedroom community here. We're really too close to normal to draw that much business into this community. 1978, the Lions Club, the Women's Club, the volunteer fire department was larger, a lot larger than what they are today. We have less volunteers today. We have a smaller ball program today than we had back in the late 70s and in the 80s. People take their kids, they want to do all the travel ball and everything. We have less volunteers in this town than what we did. Speak what Dustin Bernick spoke by being a younger resident. My son, starting a family now, they've got twins on the way. $200 a month, $165 a month. It's a great increase. Can I pay it? Yeah, I could pay it. But we have younger residents, we have older residents, and an $80,000 bill, I think is too great for many residents in this community. I understand we have several residents or board members here. I'd like to speak out and say that right now I'd say there's too many unknowns. I ask you that they table this until future. The scare tactic of saying the EPA, could mandate it. Yeah, they could, but they ain't gonna come here and bankrupt our town. And they're gonna have to help out. I mean, they just can't come here and bankrupt us. I think there's just too many unknowns. We spoke as 10 more houses could reduce the bill $2.
I think it was $10, if 10 households would reduce each of our bills $2 a month.
No, agreed. We got 3 houses being built in the south end right now. Gonna put in $25,000 to $30,000 systems, and then 3 to 5 years, being told that you have to disconnect from that system and spend $80,000 on a new system. I don't think that's real great marketing for bringing new houses into this community when we got lots down there that aren't built on at this time. I just asked board members, like I said, my opinion, I hope you table this at a future time. I believe that you have to search for more funding and something prior to make a decision that you're going to do something before you say yes, and not with the unknown of acquiring more funds. That's my opinion. Hope everyone else will step up and speak on those things.
And I hope I haven't presented it as a scare thing that the EPA is gonna come in and do this. I tried to say it's possible.
I didn't. No, I'm not saying that you did. It was just.
It's happened before.
It can.
It can,
But I don't believe that they could leave you out there and they can't bankrupt our town.
And I have no idea what kind of financing Lexington got or downtown.
Yeah, I've heard anywhere from that residents are paying $45 to $55 for their sewers.
For everything, yeah, everything.
That's, I mean, hearsay, Thursday, I've heard that, so don't hold me to that. That's what I've heard.
I got a copy of one of the bills out of Lexington a year ago, and it was a lot higher. I can't say that that's typical for everybody in Lexington, so.
I think that 165 to 200 is too great of an amount for a lot of residents we have in this. So I appreciate it.
We agree, and that's why my recommendation is to try and get it down to a reasonable or better amount. I don't know what's reasonable.
Say earlier, my name is Dave Wheeler, and the gentleman back here brought up a good point about the South Subdivision HOA fiasco. I find it peculiar that the sewer study is on the heels of that fiasco. So maybe you could address that a little bit. is this sewer study being done to try to resolve that fiasco?
My opinion, no. It's been talked about for years in Hudson.
And it's first time, I've lived here 25 years, first time I've ever heard sewer.
I heard about it when Bob Barrett was on the board. He talked about running a sewer line down the old railroad tracks, and connecting into Normal that way.
And I remember, it's probably 20 years ago, Hudson Village Board passed a cap of population on Hudson so that they wouldn't have to go to sewer system.
They did what?
They passed a cap or ordinance that they were gonna limit the population of Hudson to 2,500 people, so they wouldn't have to go to sewer system. So now all of a sudden, we wanna look at going to sewer system. Now, my personal opinion to this is, I think this project will be the same as what the Coliseum was to Bloomington and what the conference center is to Normal. It's gonna bankrupt this community. People are not gonna wanna spend $90,000 on a house extra. When a lot of those houses, other than the south, that's probably 80% of the cost of the house in the older section and the north section. Paid $140,000 for mine, now you want me to pay $75,000 to $90,000 more just so I can have sewer. And then he also brought up these houses that are putting in brand new sewer systems right now for 3 years. Doesn't make sense. So, but I do find it peculiar that the sewer study is on the heels of the HOA fiasco. It's how some.
I'm not aware of the ordinance you were talking about, and I don't know, have any of the trustees ever heard that?
I think I brought this up before, and nobody knew or heard it either, but I'm sure we could go back and do some searching through the minutes. And like I said, it's been a while. I can't remember if it was in the Hudson Happenings that when they were putting in the pantograph, or if it was in the quill. I don't remember which one I read that. I want to say it was when it was in the pantograph.
But
like I
I've
said,
never heard of that. It's not in our online ordinance.
15 to 20 years ago.
So if anybody has any knowledge of that, if you can find anything on that, then.
I tried to do search of archives, I can't, but I can't go back that far in the past, so.
Okay.
So that's what I was bringing that up, maybe you
Can't
guys should look at
imagine.
your minutes.
Yeah,
I would think you'd have to keep all
that
the
would be a
minutes.
legal vote to limit the population of your town. But
No, that's what I said, they went to the official, I mean, it was in the paper. That they were gonna limit it to 2,500, so that kept them from having to.
I have not seen that ordinance, and so I don't know how we're gonna.
And yeah, so I just want to voice my opinion that, again, people moved out of Bloomington Normal, just like the gentleman said back there, is to get away from Bloomington Normal politics and fees and expenses, and trying to keep that from happening here, so we don't have to move again.
Yeah, well, we're not trying to create a Bloomington Normal either. It would be
Some
nice
of
if
the
we
things
had
I've
a
seen passed
restaurant
in
here in
new
town.
ordinances, I
I'm
think
sorry.
they are. I said, some of the new ordinances I've seen passed here in Hudson, I think you are.
Would you tell me which one?
Throwing snow clear across the street, $75 fine for that, nickel dime things.
Okay, thank you. Do we have anyone else? We've got 2 people, okay?
Brian Beard, 406 North Broadway. I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak and voice my opinion on these issues as well. I'll be brief. I've tried to maintain an open mind about what's being considered, looking at the costs that they know. I realize that you can't figure out all the costs, but it feels like there's still quite a few unknowns to make this kind of a decision. I personally am opposed to what's being presented based on what I see and what I understand and the opinions I've talked to people about. Ripping up the back of my yard, whether it be landscape moving a shed. And then also the connection from my septic to connect it. That's certainly something I'm not looking forward to. And when all is said and done, it doesn't move the needle for me personally, nor do I see it a strong enough business case that it makes sense for that ROI. Again, that's my personal opinion. I don't look forward to the cost, and that's probably for me the biggest thing. Yes, I can afford it, but I don't want to add that to our personal budget. Everyone that I've spoke to around my neighborhood, I'm not trying to stir up issues, but no one I have talked to personally has supported this approach. And then I will also speak to those who are elderly that live in the older section of Hudson. Affordability is an issue, and I think Jeff touched on that. We have, I can think of at least 8 individuals within a couple blocks of me that live alone, elderly people, and adding that kind of expense on their bill would be difficult. And so I just appreciate the opportunity to speak. I appreciate the work that you do. In your position, I've been in leadership positions like that before. And anyway,
Thank you very much.
Right, Pouch. I'm gonna have a hard time topping your brother, for which I thank you. I don't actually have any questions. I'm gonna basically present my position on this, and that's that it's way expensive. And this is a fairly common opinion from what I can tell talking to people. The best case scenario is something like $1,500 a year. The worst case scenario is something like $2,200 a year. That's a lot of money. We don't seem to have any real need to have a sewer system installed. In addition to the direct cost of the sewer system, we're going to have a lot of infrastructure destroyed. Sheds, trees are going to be coming down, and it's not just a matter of, I want to see squirrels. Frankly, if someone wanted to kill the squirrels, I'd be all in favor. I might pay $100 for that. But they've chewed up too much electronics on it. But those trees cut down on my heating costs in winter, keep it a lot less windy. They cut down on my air conditioning costs in the summer. They keep my house a lot shadier. I really don't want to see a lot of needless, well, at the moment needless, construction that's going to have a big impact on our carbon footprint. It's going to have a big impact on our utility costs. It'll probably have a big impact on our sales, on the sale prices of houses in the old part of town, and I don't think it's going to be a good one. Part of why I bought that house, because it was a nice shaded lot. That was a big selling point for us. And I think that might be the case for a lot of people in the old part of town. At the very least, I think we need to have a referendum of some sort before we go forward with this big of an expense being imposed on the residents. I don't hear a lot of people talking about how much they want more businesses in town. And living on Franklin Street, I assure you, I never have thought we don't have enough truck traffic. There's enough thoroughfares already. Please wait. At the very least, wait a while before we move forward on this. It'd be good to hear from a lot more people in town. Probably have a referendum on this. Actually, I think I've covered my notes.
Okay, thank you.
Philip Carr. I said this early on that, well, I want to say thank you to everybody for being here, but I don't think the board should be the one making this decision. I think this should be a community decision. This should be up for vote. Everybody should have their say in it, right? So that's really that's all I want to say.
Okay, thank you, and I will clarify that with our attorney, to see if it can be a binding resolution instead of a non-binding resolution.
Oh, my name's Dale Whitwood, been a long time resident. I would have concerns if we had a lot of septic failures, but we don't in our town, and we haven't. It's been going on for 60, 70 years in this town. We don't have failures. There's some now and then, and most of the problem is because the people haven't pumped their own system. I'm a small business person in town, and this is gonna affect me really big. So is there a different cost that's gonna be on a commercial building over a residential house? One question I have.
That would be decided once we get a sewer ordinance set up.
So some rough numbers I got on the rental homes I got. In your 40-year plan, it's gonna cost me $500,000 is what I'm gonna have to pay. That's a ton of money. If I put a brand new system in every one of those houses, it'd only be $200,000. I think the amount of money that we're talking about to put this sewer system in this town is way out of line. It would have been great if Littell and Barron's would have got it done when they did it in the 70s, but they didn't get it done. In today's program, for what our town, how the septics work, to put a new system in, at the cost it is, it's not feasible, I don't think.
Thanks, Dale.
Susan Parsha. I've lived in town about 40 years, and the growth is, the population was like 900 when I got here, and it's 1,800, 2,000 now. So the growth has not been huge, but I've been asking people for like years why we don't already have a sewer system in town. And I truly admit, math is not my strong suit, but I am a senior citizen. I live alone, and I still am generally in favor of it. I'm thinking that I had septic failure in my yard and had to replace that. And I just think that we are harming all of our groundwater in the area without doing that. So I just want to say there's been a lot of comments against it, but I think that it should be considered, obviously, with as much financial help as possible. But I think that it's something that we should move forward with, at least with regard to future studies.
Thank you. If anyone else? Couple.
I'll make it real brief. I'm generally in favor of the system. I too think more input from the community would be beneficial. Referendum to take the pulse of what the city as a whole says or has a feeling of. I'll share an experience. I used to live in the country just outside of Gridley. A couple of years ago, they had a school referendum. Apples and oranges, I get it. So there's roughly 8,400 people, voting people in the El Paso Gridley School District. They were asking the community, build a school, not build a school. Not where, do we build it, not build it. They had several town meetings, they made all kinds of promises, they ended up writing up the referendum, which basically gave the school board carte blanche to build whatever that they wanted to build. Again, 8,400 people who were able to vote in the community. 840 actually voted, pro or con. They only got 10%. I only bring that up to some of the comments that I've made earlier. We can't get people to come to these meetings. We can't get people to come out to vote for important elections. Are we going to really get the pulse we're looking for through a referendum is the question that I'm kind of throwing out there for us to think about in discussion, for whatever it's worth. Again, thank you.
Thank you. I see a Kingsley t-shirt here. Do we allow those here?
Danny Tanner. So I know at some of the other meetings, and I haven't seen, and that might be on me, that there was questions about TIF money being potentially used. Has that been decided for this project? Can that be used for this project? Or no?
TIF money could be used for some of it.
Okay. And then that amount would be determined later, right? Okay. You spoke earlier about the 10-year growth plan. Is that available to the public currently, or is that something that is not been made available?
Is what available?
The 10-year growth plan that you spoke of earlier?
Yeah, it's on our website.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you? Okay, I can look it up then. Are we, so is that for just residential, commercial and residential, or what does that look like then?
It's primarily residential.
Okay. And is
Number
that-
one item on the plan is to do a sewer study.
Okay, and does that, fair enough, does that include, so mainly residential, does that include potentially changing any residential zones to commercial? Or no?
No, I don't think it does.
Okay, and then this whole project, is that reliant solely on the Benward system moving out, or is it if they decide, like, is that a go for sure, the Benward system moving out, or is that still?
No,
in their
it's not a go
process?
for sure.
Okay.
It's not a for sure thing that we would connect to it.
Okay.
If they did come out.
Okay.
That's the option that's preferred right now.
That's the preferred option instead
Yeah.
of being
It's
slushies, right?
From an economic point of view, that's, that makes sense.
Would we be moving, so if they did not move out, would that number include going further than the 1 mile south of town, or is that dependent on the 1 mile?
That's
south
all
of
that's
town?
included today.
Okay, perfect.
I mean, you could go another mile or two, but you'd have additional costs.
I think that's all the questions. I think that's all. I could answer some of the questions they asked you, but we're getting that.
We've got more meetings and you can come to any village board meeting. The trustees and I are all on the website. You can email us or call us.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any additional questions?
Kevin Kelly, and Greg, this is a question, it's gonna follow
Kevin,
up
can you
to,
repeat your name so
yeah,
everybody
Kevin Kelly,
needs to
801
know your
Pettit
trustee?
Drive, Hudson. I'm gonna follow up on Russell's question on that design that you have, yes. Can you further kind of state what that 6 lift stations in Bloomington versus 6 lift stations in Hudson? I mean, I'm kind of looking at the geographic area of Bloomington, the size of population.
Kevin, again, I mean, this
And
is not, this
I'm-
is not a final design.
Okay.
right? This is a concept based on ground elevations that we were able to pull off at Topo Valley.
Okay.
So
I remember you saying at a board meeting or before, this is the facilities plan report, this would be submitted to the IEPA. This, because this is final here, right?
yeah, a final facility planning report.
And how's that different from a design final? I'm not an engineer, I don't know.
About 140 sheets.
Okay. And how many millions of dollars?
How many-
140 sheets different, how is it different? And you said 140 sheets of paper, right? Is that it? So how many millions of dollars difference?
One of the elements that we had told the board back in March that we were going to need to do to be able to move this closer to final design would be a survey of the village to be able to get ground elevations at various locations. All right, throughout the village to be able to make the final design.
Okay.
So at that point, a number of these elements would be confirmed, or we would determine that we could combine those. But from a initial conservative cost perspective, we were looking at, okay, in order to take care of this area, we likely need a lift station.
6 of them. And like I said, I'm not an engineer. You're saying we need 6.
Mr. Waller is our engineer. He says Bloomington has 6. I'm just trying to reconcile why we need so many compared to, I'm not an engineer. I don't know the finer design. This is what you provided for us. This is what I've been looking at since what? February, January, kind of preliminary.
Yes.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around it and understand that. And personally, I'm not gonna get into the cost. People have talked about that quite a bit. I'm just concerned about the plan. So how much, like I said, 6 for Bloomington, 6 for Hudson, 80,000 population versus 1,800 that we're gonna ramp it up for sizing it up to, I think, what, 3,750? Just, we're ramping up to about 3,750, and that's where we're looking 50 years out. And why we have 6 versus 6. Like I said, I'm just trying to understand it. What I would recommend personally, if we do go forward, like with a referendum, I support that completely. I think we need to have a referendum personally. And also, I think we need to have another engineering firm to check work. Hey, is it worth it for $5, $10, $20,000 just to look at the plan, somebody else look at another pair of eyes to go forward? That's my personal opinion. That's up to the board, I know. Thank you.
All right, anyone else?
Yeah, I just want to clarify,
Wait till you get to the mic,
yeah.
please.
Mary Jo Waller, I can tell you that the population of Bloomington is 78,000 people. Here, 1,700. So there's 44 times more people in the city of Bloomington than there are in Hudson. Then the area. So the area of the city of Bloomington is 17,400 acres. And the area of Hudson is 520 acres. That's 33 times, I should say, the city of Bloomington is 33 times the size of Hudson. I really think even before we would have a referendum, we need a more finalized design. Whether the design it is exactly perfect the way it is or not, I think that we've talked about some things today that show potential for significant cost changes. I think those need to be more confirmed, more reliable, more accurate. And then at that point, we would have that referendum where we would all have really solid information about the costs before we made this decision. So if the costs are gonna be lower, we probably would have more people that would support it. I would also say with the 6 lift stations, something I didn't mention last time that I had a concern with is maintaining them. My husband has told me that those 6 lift stations in the city of Bloomington, which are probably all bigger, they require a considerable amount of maintenance and expertise. I don't believe that the current staff we have would do that. And I'm not sure that the study has enough resources allocated to the maintenance of all these lift stations that we would have to maintain if we went with this plan. So I just think those things should be taken under consideration, and we just need a little bit more accuracy, and then we could move forward again. So I mean, we have to, it's, I think, pretty normal for an engineering firm to do the work, and then someone else reviews it before anything goes forward. So things can get corrected, clarified, and so forth. And maybe that is part of the process that you have that happens later. I'm just suggesting that we do that before we decide to go forward. And that might cost us some more money up front, and we don't decide to do it, but at least we've made a better educated decision. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I do have a quick question I didn't ask before, but if we were to proceed with this, let's say 4 or 5 years down the road, and you connect to the sewer, does the old septic tank have to come out in the septic field? And what are the costs associated with that? And not personally seen any.
It would not have to come out. It would be pumped out and then filled with sand. I don't know. The cost to pump out a tank is what, $300 or $400, $200?
I just paid $25.
I
So-
what it would cost to fill the
All right,
tank.
so to clean it, because I paid $250 just last year to empty it out, but that, so you're not saying this, the old septic tank doesn't have to come out? Nor does the field have to be anything done with that?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Not, last call for questions. Okay, I'm gonna wrap the meeting up then. I wanna thank everybody for coming. Your comments and your questions are why we're having the meeting, so. A lot of good questions, a lot of good comments, and we appreciate you taking your time and coming up here and asking questions. If you have a good idea on how to get more than 10% turnout for a vote, I'm all ears. So, yeah. So, okay, so we have one question or comment?
So the meeting is being recorded.
Yes. the
Are you
meeting is-
able to, are you putting a link on the website? Oh, good.
Yeah. Okay, I want to thank everybody for coming. The meeting is officially over. And thanks everyone.